Hello and welcome to Run Testers, my name's Nick, and in this video we're going to be comparing the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris and the Nike Vaporfly 3. The Vaporfly 3 and the Sky Paris are both carbon plate racing shoes, two of the better carbon plate racing shoes on the market, I would say. Both have pretty high price tags as you'd expect for carbon shoes. The Metaspeed is £220 or $255. Vaporfly is £235 or $250. I think some of the newer colours are coming in at £240 as well. The Metaspeed Sky Paris is the lighter shoe. They are both very light though. The Metaspeed is 188 grams or 6.6 ounces. The Vaporfly is 206 grams or 7.3 ounces. Both of those are in my UK size 9. Got a 5mm drop in the Metaspeed and an 8mm drop in the Nike. The Asics has an FF Turbo Plus midsole, which is lightweight, soft and bouncy foam. It's lighter, softer and bouncier than the FF Turbo that was used in past versions of the shoe. You've got a wider carbon plate than with previous models as well, and you've got a very lightweight Motion Wrap 2.0 upper. There's really not much to it at all, as you'd expect in a racing shoe that weighs such a small amount. A little bit of padding around the heel, but in general just keep it stripped back, hold the foot in place without adding any extra weight. You've got a minimal rubber outsole with reasonable forefoot coverage, there's a lot of holes there, and then sections of rubber that stretch not quite to the back of the shoe, so you do have a little bit of exposed foam at the heel. And if you are a heel striker, you will rough that up a little bit, I've found. The Nike, you've got a Flyknit mesh upper, really open, very lightweight again. You've got a strip of padding around the back of the shoe, which I'm not always a big fan of. We'll talk more about that in the fit section. But again, just a very lightweight racing upper that's designed to keep the shoe, feeling very light on the foot. You've got a ZoomX foam midsole, Nike's PEBA-based foam with a full-length carbon plate running through the shoe as well. Cutouts in the shoe to try and reduce the weight. It's actually quite interesting that Asics hasn't done that, given that the shoe is so lightweight. You've got pretty good rubber coverage on the forefoot of the outsole, two strips of rubber at the back, a lot of exposed foam there, and we have seen durability issues with the Vaporfly 3 with it kind of tearing up around these strips at the back, and Tom actually ripped one of those strips right off. So neither are going to be the most durable shoes when it comes to the outsole. They're both quite minimal designs, but that is one of the reasons they are so lightweight. Quick note here is that Asics obviously has the Metaspeed Edge Paris as well, which in the past has been viewed as the more Vaporfly-like shoe of the Sky and the Edge. We haven't tested the Edge Paris yet, so it'll be interesting to see how these two shoes compare, as it might give some insights into how the Sky will compare to the Edge.
So when it comes to fit then, I ran in a UK1.5 in both of these shoes. That would be my regular running shoe size in a Nike and in an Asics. And when it comes to teasing out the differences in fit, the things that I would highlight here, I think the Nike Vaporfly Next% 3 a little looser in the heel. It's not quite so much security. The Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris heel collars hold a bit better and my heel is held in place much more firmly. There's a bit of looseness in the Vaporfly Next% 3. Then when you move down into that midfoot area, I would say that the Vaporfly 3 are actually a little bit more comfortable across the top of the foot. The Metaspeed Sky Paris, at the back of the toes, there's a little bit of tightness. And it, I mean, you could call it security, but it's bordering on a little bit tight. Both of them, I think, have reasonably good lockdown. I'd say that the Nike Vaporfly Next% 3 just feels a little bit more flexible, and I kind of like that kind of roominess a little bit. If you like it really snug and dialed, then you might prefer the Paris. And then that kind of carries on into the toe box, where I think, those hugely sort of perforated uppers that you've got on the Vaporfly Next% sort of make for a much sort of roomier feel in the toe box. There's a bit more wiggle room, a bit more flex. They just feel a bit more airy. I think the other thing to note with the Vaporfly 3s is the tongues sit quite high. They're not particularly rigid, so it doesn't cause too much of a problem, but they do sit higher than the Metaspeed Sky 3, could potentially cause some irritation. But overall, I would recommend going true to size in both of these shoes.
So in terms of fit, I've had both of these shoes in a UK size 8. That is my typical running shoe size. And I've got pretty skinny, narrow feet. So generally fitting into these kind of more low profile racing shoes isn't normally a problem for me. And I would say on both these shoes, it's been very, very good. I think most people would probably be happy or be fine going true to size in both of these shoes. I think in terms of space up front of the toes, very happy in terms of that. I definitely think both of these uppers are pretty, breathable first and foremost. I think there's a good amount of volume on the top of your foot as well too, in terms of what you'll get from these uppers as well too. When you work down to the midfoot, I think they both kind of narrow in and give you that kind of nice lockdown feel that you want from racing. In terms of getting a good lockdown, I think there's similar laces across both of these shoes. The tongues are really skinny as well too. I found I've had to work a little bit harder to get a good lockdown on the Metaspeed Sky Paris, and I have had a little bit of kind of slipping around at the heel, but once I've kind of played around with it, it's been absolutely fine. On the Nike, there hasn't been those kind of issues though. As I said, the makeup of the laces and the tongue are very similar. The heel padding, obviously in the Nike, it's internally, so you are getting some support there and some comfort there at the heel. whereas it's kind of on the it's more traditional on the Asics shoe, which as I said, apart from the kind of lockdown issues that I've had at times, generally it's been fine. I've had no kind of issues of heel rub. So I would say, you know, based on my experience, going true to size, most people should be fine at doing that.
When it comes to fit of the two shoes, I have my normal size for both, which is a UK 9, which is a US 10 with both Nike and Asics. I'd say it's the same size I have across all their range. It's probably a little bit more dialed in than the cushion shoes in their ranges. So if you've got a very tight fit in something like the Invincible or the Gel Nimbus from Asics, then maybe you could look at sizing up in these because they're racing shoes. They have a slightly more dialed in fit, but I like that in a racing shoe, and I had a really good fit in the toe box. Midfoot all good, no slipping there. Heel on the Asics is very good. Hold the foot in place without any irritation. Did find this little strip of foam on the Vaporfly irritates my Achilles. I don't really like that design. I've had it on a few Vaporfly generations now, and yeah, it just rubs me up a little bit the wrong way, but it's not a huge problem. I've run a marathon in the shoe, and you know, it's not a big problem. I just don't like it as much as the Asics design. So I've done a lot of running in both of these shoes. I've done about 170k in the Vaporfly now, including a 2:33 at the London Marathon and an all-out 4.8k in a relay. And with the Asics, I've done about 125k. I've run a half marathon in the shoe and my parkrun PB. So I've done a lot of racing, a lot of workouts in the shoes. I really like both of them. I think they are, you know, right up there with the top tier of carbon plate racing shoes, and they probably operate in a similar sphere, with both being quite lightweight compared to the really cushioned carbon shoes like the Alphafly or the Hoka Cielo X1. So I think the Vaporfly is almost the forgotten shoe at the moment, just because it hasn't come out this year, obviously. I took it out again for a training run last week, running 16k alternating 325 and 355, just to remind myself of the feel of the shoe, just because we've had all these great new shoes come out this year, and it's getting a bit forgotten, and it's still a very, very much an amazing shoe. Like, it's really lightweight, lots of bounce, a little bit softer than past Vaporflies. You get a slightly more cushioned feel, I think, for something like the Marathon, which I did in the shoe last year, but you still get a really propulsive, aggressive ride. It's, you know, still an amazing shoe. Like, I think it's the best Vaporfly yet. I know lots of people prefer the Vaporfly 2 because it's got that slightly firmer feel, but I think this is really nice. Good balance of cushioning and speed and lightweightness. Like I said, I've done a 4.8k run in the shoe, which I was running pretty much at my 5k PB pace. Really went all out, and you can still do that in the shoe. It's a brilliant short distance racer. Just a slight touch more cushion now, I think, for longer distance events. And the Asics has a few similarities actually to the Vaporfly, I think, and I talked about this in the review because it is a lightweight shoe with that nimble feel, but a nice bouncy feel as well. I think with the Metaspeed Sky, what you get compared to the Vaporfly is a slightly firmer feeling under the forefoot, because the way the plate sits a bit higher in the foam, it gives you a slightly more punchy feel off the toes, I'd say. And you know, there's going to be a lot of discussion about the Paris versus the Edge and how the Edge is more like the Vaporfly, and I guess what that amounts to is the fact that the Vaporfly has that slightly more scoot plate in the forefoot, so you get a softer feel under the forefoot, which maybe, I don't know, aids a bit more in a fast transition or gives you that just a softer feel there, which some people might like. But I like the slightly more propulsive feel you get from the Edge in the forefoot, because it's not harsh at all, it's just a bit poppier, a bit punchier, and I think it works really well. Did a run in both shoes at the same time, and that really showed off this difference in the forefoot in particular. I think they feel quite similar all around, both lightweight shoes, both fast transition, easy to pick your feet up in both, slightly firmer feel in the forefoot of the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris, I would say, whereas the Vaporfly has that softer feeling under the forefoot. You know, still aggressive, still firm, still punches you off your toes, and some people prefer the way it rolls through, but I do think it's pretty similar across the board. I slightly prefer the way the Asics feels myself, with that extra firmness there, which I do like myself, just to keep aiding a high turnover of my legs, which is obviously what the scoop plate is meant to do in the Vaporfly and in the Edge, but I think we can get a bit hung up on what the brand says these shoes are for. Only when you run in them does it really come across how good they feel for you as a runner and the way it works for you. So yeah, I really like the way the Metaspeed Sky feels, really like the way the Vaporfly feels. You've got that difference there in the forefoot, where you've got the slightly firmer feel in the Asics, which I think makes it very easy for me to load the plate, even though in theory I'd probably be better suited to the Vaporfly or the Edge as a high cadence runner, though I do love the Vaporfly as well. Both of the shoes in the run test have a slight durability question mark. You see the Vaporfly just ripped up around the back of the shoe there, done the same. This is my right shoe, so I'm a slightly more pronounced heel striker on my left foot, so I think I've had a bit more roughage up on both of these shoes with my left shoe, but nothing too bad yet. It's actually going to affect performance or anything like that. It looks a bit ugly at the back is all. Certainly if you are a heel striker, you can have a little bit of a concern with both of these shoes. They haven't really gone all out to put a lot of rubber at the back of the shoe, a lot of rubber there in general. They're very lightweight, and one of the reasons for that is quite a minimal outsole, so you might have to look out for a bit of durability there, and I wouldn't be taking these onto kind of rough paths in any way. I'd very much stick to tarmac with these.
So then in testing, I've logged many miles, trained, raced and marathon tested both of these shoes. The Paris I've done more recently than the Vaporfly 3, but I've given them the same treatment in my tests. Now the minute I laced up the Paris, it gave me some of the Vaporfly 2 vibes, and I kind of immediately thought that this is almost the shoe that I think the Vaporfly 3 should have been. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Vaporfly 3. It's not that it's a bad shoe, far from it. I could happily race fast in it, I have done, but I think the softer midsole here definitely sort of took some of the way, the sort of top end of that shoe, and for me there's just something missing in the way the kind of midsole sinks. The opposite really is true of the Metaspeed Paris. I did a solo marathon test in it that you can find on the channel, and there's a thrusting kind of immediacy to the midsole here that's more punchy and instant, a bit like the old Vaporfly 2. Now this is a shoe, the Paris, that almost dares or even demands that you run fast. And to really tease out the differences between these two shoes, I also did my usual side-by-side mile with one shoe on each foot, and here's what I found. So I've just done a side-by-side mile. I've got the Vaporfly 3 on the left foot, I've got the Paris on the right foot. The big difference here is just how punchy they feel with the foam. The minute you put them on, the Nike midsole foam, as they've kind of tuned it to be softer in this sort of version of the Vaporfly, it just squishes. It's a lot more soft, it's a lot more malleable. You can feel it underfoot the moment you're walking in it. The Paris, it feels like it has more volume underfoot, even though actually the stack heights sort of vary. There's more in the forefoot under the Paris, but less in the heel, even though it feels like there's more across the whole foot. But what you get from the Paris is you can feel that foam, it doesn't sink so deep, it responds almost immediately even when you're walking, and that sort of follows through into the run. But there's just a lot more kind of punchy immediacy, I think, from the midsole foam in the Paris than you're going to get in the Vaporfly Next% 3. The Vaporfly Next% 3, it was my big kind of criticism from Generation 2 to Generation 3, was that I just think they tuned it a little bit too soft, and it lost some of that kind of firmness and stiffness and punchiness and raciness that you had from the Next% 2, made it a bit more democratic, made it a bit more accessible, made it probably a more comfortable shoe to run in if you were sort of running not so well at the end of a marathon. You know, it was a little bit more sort of balanced in that sense, whereas the Vaporfly 2 was kind of pretty much you had to be running quite well and all out to get the best out of it. But I think that's taken something really important away from the Next% 3. And that is something that the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris actually has. And I think it has quite a lot of it. It's very, very punchy. There is a stiffness, there is an immediacy to the foam that when you're kind of running sort of side by side on this, you can feel the energy that's just punching back far quicker. Now, there is a little bit of a caveat to that. And that is just depending on how you're going to use these shoes and whether or not you need a little bit more stability. I think the Vaporfly Next% 3, because it sort of offers a slightly flatter landing, has more stability than the slightly narrower platform of the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris, or narrower than a lot of carbon shoes anyway, that Paris. And deeper into runs where you might not be running with fine form, I don't think the Paris is going to look after you as much as the Nike Vaporfly Next% 3 might. The other thing that I do sense here, it feels like there's sort of more foam under the kind of medial side of the Paris, and that almost sort of rolls you slightly to the right even when you're just walking here, whereas the Next%, it's a much kind of flatter overall sort of base. And what that means, I think, in practice, if you're going to run a marathon where you're not sure what you're going to get towards the end of it and you want something that's going to be a little bit more forgiving, then I think you'll get that more with the Vaporfly 3. I think it might be a risk to go for the Metaspeed Sky Paris. I think the Paris is definitely a shoe like the Vaporfly Next% 2 that you're going to want to basically be pretty confident that you're going to be running in your finest form right the way from start to finish.
So in terms of that run test, now I have raced in both of these shoes. Obviously these are shoes built for racing. It has been shorter distances races that I have done. So I raced first in the Vaporfly 3, did a kind of 5k race which was just over 20 minutes, and then more recently I was out with Asics for their kind of festival running event in Paris, and they had a kind of evening kind of 5k race, and I did kind of sub 20 in this shoe. So I know these shoes are absolutely capable of running quicker, those shorter distances. And then I've kind of done, I haven't raced longer distances in these shoes, but I have done longer marathon training runs, half marathon training runs as well too. So I kind of, I've got a good sense of what they feel like to run a little bit longer in as well. Now what I would say is, first and foremost, lovely light shoes. And if you want a really light shoe, these are two of the lightest kind of carbon racing shoes that you can pick up. And from that point of view, and I love a light racing shoe, these have felt very, very good to wear. Well, they're not going to disappear. You just don't notice them in the same way that you maybe notice some other kind of marathon super shoes. I think what it really boils down to is what you're getting in terms of that midsole performance and how it feels and what you're getting from that ride. Now, what I would say is both are propulsive, both feel explosive to run quicker, both feel very, very good to run faster in. Now, I am a kind of 3:20 marathon runner. I do kind of 40-minute kind of 10Ks, kind of just creeping under sub 20-minute 5Ks to give you a sense of how quick I'm running in it, maybe easing off as well too. Now, what I would say is over those shorter distances, I found that you get that pop, you get that life, you get that kind of bounce that you want. I think, for me, I think in the shorter distances, I found that maybe the Vaporfly 3 feels, in terms of what you're getting for the Zoom X foam, is something that is a little bit bouncier, maybe. I don't think it's a huge amount in it. You absolutely get some bounce in the Metaspeed Sky Paris, but I think maybe there's just a touch more of that in what you're getting in the Nike's kind of midsole. I think when I've run longer in these shoes, I found that particularly what you're getting from the midsole in the Metaspeed Sky Paris is something that I think is a bit more forgiving, particularly at those longer distances. Now, if I tire a little bit, and obviously these shoes do want you to keep moving and moving quickly through those transitions, I found that when I've run longer in the Metaspeed Sky Paris, I felt more comfortable to do that if I've had to ease off a little bit. Now, not easing off massively, but I do think particularly what you're getting in difference with the forefoot's of these shoes, I think the Metaspeed Sky Paris just feels a little more comfortable when you maybe are kind of cruising and maybe not all out running at your hardest, quickest times. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've noticed with these shoes, because I think ultimately, in terms of, being aggressive shoes, they absolutely are. In terms of being shoes that give you a level of, lovely level of bounce to make an enjoyable shoe to run fast in, absolutely they can do that as well too. I think in terms of the midsoles, maybe there's a touch more bounce in the Zoom X compared to what you're getting on the Metaspeed Sky Paris's midsole foam, but I don't think there's a huge amount in it. But I think the key thing for me is that kind of comfort over those longer distances, where I think when I've run a little bit longer in the Vaporfly 3, I've found like I've maybe wanted a little bit more of that foam, a little bit like you will get probably on an Alpha Fly 3, that little bit extra stack. I think maybe while the profiles are pretty similar, I think what you're getting from that midsole foam in the Metaspeed Sky Paris just lends itself to running a little bit longer, or feeling more comfortable to run a bit longer. And in terms of the outsoles, it's pretty similar in terms of the layouts. It's very much focused on the forefoot of both of these shoes, there's exposed areas of the foam as well too. Now, I was always worried, or have had issues with the Metaspeed Sky previously, in terms of particularly at the heel, where I kind of drop back to my own heel striker and it is kind of eaten into the foam. I'm not seeing that so far, and I put a fair amount of mileage in the Metaspeed Sky Paris too. The Vaporfly 3, generally I think it's the same story here. You don't want to overuse these shoes, and I do think, it is really about saving for racing, maybe saving for those faster kind of training days. And I think if you do that, you're going to get a good amount of life. I have to say I'm surprised by what I'm getting from the Metaspeed Sky Paris so far, particularly compared to the previous shoes. But I think outsole durability and, general grip as well is going to feel similar. Maybe, getting a little bit more in terms of that traction on the Metaspeed Sky Paris, but I don't think it's a huge amount in it. So yeah, for me, two lovely shoes to run quick in. I think definitely there's some positives on the Metaspeed Sky Paris that maybe just gives it a little bit of an edge over the Vaporfly 3, but I think it's a spot, vice versa. I think it's a similar story with Vaporfly 3. I think in certain scenarios where I think it can excel and maybe feel a little bit nicer compared to the Metaspeed Sky Paris. So my verdict on whether you should go for the Nike Vaporfly 3 or the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris. So what I would say is that these are two fantastic, lightweight, carbon racing shoes, and I think whichever one you go for, you're going to get a really good experience, and one of the best shoes that you can buy right now for racing. The way I look at it is I would be picking the Nike Vaporfly 3 mainly if I'm looking for a shoe that I think works better, kind of shorter, up to kind of half marathon distance. I think with the Metaspeed Sky Paris, and that is the biggest thing for me, I feel like this is a shoe I feel more comfortable running longer in and probably going that marathon distance. I just think in terms of what you're getting in the midsole and the general feel and design of this shoe, I think it works or feels a little bit better over those longer distances. I don't think there's a massive amount in it, but I just think for me, in terms of my longer runs in these two shoes, I found that Metaspeed Sky Paris has felt a lot more comfortable, and I think you can run quicker, shorter distances in this as well too. So yeah, if it was me, if I was looking for a shoe that could cover comfortably a lot of racing distances from kind of shorter to longer, I'd be going the Metaspeed Sky Paris. If you're looking for that kind of explosive feel over kind of maybe 5K to half marathon distance, based on my experience of running in these shoes, I'd be going for the Nike Vaporfly 3. But ultimately, if I had either of these shoes, I'd be very happy in terms of them being my carbon racing shoe.
Verdict then, and I think Asics has made a better carbon race shoe here. I get what Nike did with the changes to the Vaporfly 3. It's now a much more accessible carbon race than the previous generation. But I think that extra softness, loss of stiffness, it's taken some of the spring and the punch out of the ride. And I think the Metaspeed Sky Paris has gone the other way compared to the Metaspeed Sky Plus. It's added more of the firmer, stiffer, more immediate kind of foam and underfoot feel. And as a result, it's a livelier shoe. and I think it's actually leapfrogged the Vaporfly in the Carbon Racer pecking order. So which shoe would I choose overall? Well, I think it's pretty obvious from what I've said so far. I'd choose the Metaspeed Sky Paris over the Vaporfly 3. In fact, that's exactly what I've done for my upcoming trip to the Adidas Manchester Marathon. The Paris is also cheaper, which is a bonus. And just for the record, I think I'd actually go back a generation and choose the Vaporfly 2 over the Vaporfly 3 as well.
The verdict to be these are both great shoes. Don't forget the Vaporfly. It's still an absolutely amazing carbon plate racing shoe, right up there with everything on the market. If you can get it a bit cheaper than the other shoes, because it is an older shoe, then it's certainly one to consider. Does everything well from 5Ks through to the marathon, and I think it's a fantastic shoe. All that's true of the Metaspeed Sky Paris as well, and I just prefer the way the shoe feels underfoot, and I do think it's the top shoe available for me at the moment. Interesting, I still prefer it to the Vaporfly, even as the shuffly high cadence runner. I wonder if that'll be the same when we do finally test the Edge. We still haven't got that in yet. We'll get it in, and we will test it at some point, I promise. Two great shoes here, lightweight, nimble, great for racing at any distance, a bit cheaper than some of the carbon shoes on the market. Some questions about durability, something to look out for, but overall, really good shoes. I slightly prefer the Asics Metaspeed Sky Paris myself, and that's the one I'll be going for. So that's a comparison of the Metaspeed Sky Paris and the Vaporfly 3. Please do dive into the comments, let us know what you think. Please like and subscribe and ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time.